Hey, everybody. You're looking good, Sean. Hey, everybody. Michael Campbell here. Thanks for joining us today. It is our Thursday Ask Anything with Pastor Josiah. I am Pastor Campbell, and we have a very, very, very special guest with us, one of our volunteers on the Grace team. I will let him introduce himself.
Hey everyone, my name is Sean Washburn, and I'm super excited to be on here with Josiah and Michael. And yeah, excited about our
You
conversations.
there?
I heard him.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. Yeah. Well, we're glad you're on, and I wanted to start the conversation first with just letting you know, comment any question you have. Never hold anything back. We're excited to see any questions that you guys have at home, and even if we have to get to it next week, that's okay too. Another reminder: we have our family check-in tomorrow night with Pastor Tom Sefik. So take a look at that. It's a good way to see how families are doing within the church and some practical ways as parents and as families to engage each other during the time that we have at home. So check that out. And then also check out our YouTube and Facebook page for like notifications of different videos that we're posting up. But Josiah, any questions or announcements that you'd want to share?
Well, this happens every week. I push the button and then the sound turns on. So once there it goes. I gotta turn it off. I don't know how to get into that screen without it doing that. But anyway, no, I don't think I have any announcements. Just keep reminding people that we've got activity sheets here for people who are stuck at home. Come grab one. We got it on both campuses. So grab those and if you're just joining us, we would love to answer any questions you've got or try our best to do so. So put those in the comments. Try to stump us if you want to.
Shouldn't be hard to do that. But let's start talking to our special guest that we have, Sean Washburn. Do you want to tell us about yourself, family, how long have you been at Grace, stuff like that?
Sure. Yeah, so I just blanked. All right, so I'm married to Jeanette. We've been married for almost 23 years. We have 4 kids. We have 3 teenage boys. Our oldest, Eli, he just graduated this year from high school. And then we've got 18, 16, 15, and then our daughter Eden is 7. So people are always like, "Oh, is she an accident? You know, is she the oops baby or whatever?" Like we actually had trouble before we had the boys, and then God really blessed us, and we were like, boom, you know, like 3 boys in 3 years, which was nuts. And then we really wanted more, and then it wasn't more as much like we weren't planning on the 4th. It just didn't seem like it was going to happen. Then God's like, hey, how about now? So the dynamics in our house are really cool because the boys get along great, and then just their interactions with Eden are awesome. She's just going to be a tough little girl because she's always wrestling with her brothers. They're like her personal trainers. So we've been at Grace. My wife's actually been at Grace a lot longer. She came up through the junior high back in the 90s, and Pastor Carrick was the senior high pastor, was her first. She was in his first senior high group. So it was back in the 90s. I got to know them as we were dating. We both went to Grove City College in Pennsylvania, and I was a couple years ahead of her. So we got married in 97 at Grace. It had just moved into the Pearl Road location. And there was no sanctuary where it is now. The gym was the sanctinasium kind of thing. So if you can imagine, like, where all the worship center and all that was all grass. And everything started, like the building started where the hallway is, kind of outside of the cafe. So we got married there. We had moved up to Cleveland in 99 and started working with the senior high, and ended up worked with the senior high for about 18 years through Pastor Steve McKnight and then Dale. And then it's only been in the last, say, 3 or 4 years, switched over to working with the kids ministry.
Yeah.
What grade do you work with?
What's that?
What grade do you work with?
It's actually 3s, 4s, and 5s, because it's at the 9 o'clock and we're consolidated. So I love it because when they come in as 3s, I get this, I've got them for a while, so we can really build into them.
Cool.
Yeah, and you serve like every week, right?
Yeah, well, not the last, you know,
Yeah,
9 weeks, but
given
yeah.
circumstances. Yeah, it's been weird Sundays for us here. Can you tell us why you decided to start serving the kids ministry?
Yeah, that's a good question. For me, a lot of the senior high stuff it's totally different because the senior high ministry, a lot of stuff is like not on usual, you know, not on a Sunday morning or not on a regular time. So our time was more like in retreats and small groups outside of regular schedule. And as that kind of started to fade for me, and I was realizing I just needed to kind of make a shift because of the strain with the family and stuff. I was like, I love the kids, and I hadn't done a ton on like a Sunday morning. So I think it started with over a summer they needed some volunteers on a like rotational basis,
Hmm.
and Ben, one of my sons, got involved, and then I got involved, and then they needed a teacher for that fall, and so I was like, hey, we'll do that. I think I started with the threes, and then just kind of stuck on, moved over to the other room. At one point we had kind of like a Washburn floor because I was in the one room with my son Nate, and across the hall was Eli, and then down the hall was Ben. So we had like we were like bringing them through. So, but yeah, I love that age because kind of the wonder they have about life, and you can really, especially as a guy, you know, I think predominantly, you know, when I remember when I was growing up in church, like there were a lot of women Sunday school teachers, same thing in school, a lot of women teachers, and they're awesome. But when it comes to boys, sometimes it's really powerful to have like a male teacher in there, especially like I love wrestling with them or being physical or just joking around or whatever. So I love them all, but I feel like part of my ministry is really with the boys to help encourage them and kind of lead them along that path.
That's great. Yeah. And you're an amazing example for that. I mean, even seeing your whole family serving in different capacities just is a testament to how you're leading them. To your last point with like being like a role model for the kids in that classroom, what would you say to somebody who is still like on the fence of serving? So Lord willing, when we get back to what will be the new normal, what would you say to somebody who's still on the fence about trying to serve in the kids ministry?
Um, Give it a shot. Like I think with anything, you don't know. uh, Like if it's something that they're interested at all. Like one is like these kids just love you. You know, anyone who's in there, and they just like they idolize you. One, you're way bigger than them, so just they're always going to look up to you physically anyway. But they bring so much joy in there. It's fun to just talk about topics, you know, and you don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to know a ton to be able to talk about like basic biblical truths and stories. Um, but I'd say, yeah, try it out. Like, you know, maybe you try for, every, once a month or something like that, or you're going to be a sub when someone's needed, or you're just going to be an extra volunteer that floats around. And you may find that maybe you tried with some older age kids and you're like, ugh, that didn't work great. Like I know people who like they hate the smaller kids, or they hate the teenagers or whatever. Don't let that end your search to find a good
Mhm.
volunteer position, because you may find like, oh, I tried the little kids and I loved them. So just experiment, be curious, and don't get shut, just because you had one, maybe you had a bad experience at some point.
Mm.
Don't let that shut you out from what God might want to do in you, and then also build into those kids.
Preach. Yeah, that's really good, man. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So with the whole COVID-19 and working from home and not being able to volunteer, what have you been doing to pass the time during the season?
That's tough, man.
Because I know the answer to this one, and I'm going to say it, and it's being a boss at playing basketball.
We have played some basketball at our house. I remember when my boys were little enough that I could do whatever I wanted and, own them in basketball. And that's not the case anymore because two of them are bigger than me and the other one's a better shooter anyway. So we have some pretty good challenges in the backyard. That's been fun. But I think what's weird is just to go from, I often kind of ponder like, you know, while we're still in the world that we're in, we're so like time dependent, like we think about what's coming up this week or tomorrow or whatever in our schedules. And when all of a sudden that's like wiped out, I know people were joking about like, what day is it? You kind of like the days even. And I think I definitely wrestled with some nights where I felt like just, I don't know, a struggle, maybe not a purpose struggle, but like, what are we doing? Like just feeling lost and like, okay, there's nothing, I can't see anything, in the foreseeable future as far as things that we're going to do or plan. And so, as a dad, I think trying to think of, hey, what could we do? Like, let's do some frisbee golf out in front tonight. Sometimes we'll do that in our yard or whatever, or being more purposeful. We have all this time that everyone wanted, but then when you almost have more than you're used to, then it can seem like, what are we, just boring? like, so it's yeah, it's a challenge, but the basketball is definitely one that we took advantage of.
That's good. Yeah. Different trick shots and everything. It's a good time. Like you were saying, it's a good time to disciple and, spend time with the family and everything.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any questions coming in, Josiah, at all, or?
Nope. Nothing coming in yet.
All right. Well, let's jump straight into it.
Yep.
First question that we have came in from our Instagram page. In regards to our children, what conversations will come their way as Christians in a public school setting? So when their children and our children do enter the public school, what are some challenges you think they'll face? And yeah, Sean, you definitely have some experience with this, but Josiah, you want to open it up?
Actually, I would love to hear from Sean since he's actually already had kids come through school. Mine would be predicting the future. So I would love to hear from Sean.
That's a good question. I mean, I think one thing that they'll find is, you're going to be challenged with a lot of situations that you maybe, like I found as a parent, it's one thing to, like, the tendency is to want to maybe protect kids from, let's say it's things that would be dangerous to them or whatever, some that path you don't want them to go down.
Mm-hmm.
But really you ultimately want to teach them how to think, and so like, how, what do you do when you encounter this thing that's you didn't anticipate, or when, when we're not around and you're, like when your kids will come home and they, maybe they'll learn some word, and you're like, we don't talk like that in our house, but like you got it from somewhere. So let's talk, instead of being like, I never want to hear that word again. Like, okay, let's talk about where did you hear that? What does it mean? So that it's not like something that they're afraid of or ashamed of. So I'd say that whole concept of, you can't predict for everything that they're going to encounter, but helping to think about, maybe it's things that we, learned in Sunday school stuff, and how to apply that to like how to love people better, understanding people. I mean, right now that's the big thing right now. It's like this is your life as you understand it, but there's so much that you don't understand because this person over here that's in your class, like they're coming from a totally different background. So let's talk about how we can be more understanding of their situation. And maybe, I know with my daughter, we had a lot of talks, because I think back to when I was a kid and maybe there was a bully or something, and I didn't know why they were that way. Now I can look back and be like, okay, I had a dad in the picture, they didn't have a dad in the picture, and maybe there's some jealousy there, but as a kid, you can't see that. So as a parent, to be able to look at maybe our own experiences and help them decipher like why things maybe are the way they are, and then what to do about that.
That's so good. I love that you're making an environment in your home where it's like they don't have to come home and be afraid of the things that they're challenged with or learning, or afraid to share the word that they heard that but because if you create that environment, that culture in your own house where you have open conversations, then they don't have to come home. Because if they are afraid, if you did just say, I never want to hear that again, then they wouldn't open up about other things that they're not quite sure if you're going to like to hear or not. And then they're learning stuff that you have no idea about. So I'm taking notes. I'm just repeating back what I heard you just say, and just so I can remember it later. That's so good.
It really is creating that conversation. I mean, whether that's, people fighting or swearing or different stuff on social media, to have that open dialogue actually teaches the parent a lot about what's going on in society as well. So I think conversation is key to not only like see stuff, but get to the root issues with what they're going through, and really preparing the kid is really important too. So like, even if they don't believe in Christianity, which they probably don't, how do we create an environment as a church and as a family to set a foundation that when somebody tries to, knock the roof down, there's still some really strong base that's rooted down that can't be shaken. Because if we're just doing superficial stuff and like symptom management or behavior modification, that whole worldview that comes along with the public atmosphere is totally gonna trash it, and then parents will be like, wait, what happened? And that's probably because there wasn't a good foundation, which makes our role as parents even that much more important,
Yeah.
So maybe a succinct answer to that question, what are the questions that your kids are going to face going into school, is more those, you don't have to brace yourself for every single question. Instead, create the environment that when those questions come up, you and your kid together can explore them and figure them out. So priority would be creating that safe conversational environment at home and laying the firm foundation of truth for your kids, so that because we can't predict all of the questions that will come up, and we could list a long list of them and you could try to become an expert in them, but if your kid never asks because they're not comfortable asking you, then the culture is more important. Love it. I said succinct and then I rambled. I do that all the time.
It's all right. But to both y'all's point, we'll get to the next question, because it really is a topic that we need to explain as parents. But how do you love somebody who doesn't agree with you, or if they're doing something that you don't agree with?
Man, that's like the social media question right there, right?
Yeah.
Like, I would come back to that understanding thing. Like, just, I think if you start off with the assumption that like you don't know their whole story, and I was thinking the other day about like almost like anyone you meet, or even if you've known someone for a long time, you're essentially coming into their story. Like if their life is a movie, like you're coming into everyone's life like 45 minutes late, like there's something that happened at the beginning of the movie that's crucial to what happens later, but we don't, like, unless we take the time to really find out what that is. Jesus was awesome about that. Like, one, he was God, so he knew this stuff, but like he also understood that like this person that everyone sees right here, they didn't just show up that way. Like something happened, over time to bring them to that place. So like, loving that. I think not where we're not very loving is where we're like, as Christians, it's just sad. I mean, I've been the same way too, but like, I think we're just known a lot of times for being like, well, you got to be this way, or if you believe this, God hates that, or, whatever it is. It's like heaping shame on people, even whatever. And then like we just talked about with our kids, like that conversation is just immediately just closed off because, well, like, I'm not going to open up to you. We obviously don't agree, but we can't have a conversation because I already know that you think that I'm living sinfully, or we don't agree on the situation. So
we got two questions rolling in, both for Sean. Well, the first one I'm assuming is from Tiffany. She says, what's something you didn't expect from parenting older kids? So something that you learned that you didn't expect to see.
Wow, that's a good question.
You want an easy one while you think about that?
Sure.
Gary's asking you, when will Cleveland see another championship?
2020. Well, I'd say 2021, but if the season gets bumped back again, it might be 2022. So,
but right around the corner, huh?
Yeah.
Cool.
Right after, you can tell Gary, right after Brunswick wins the state championship, I think.
He also says he misses you, and then he says laugh out loud. So I don't know if we're supposed to or if he's laughing out loud.
So I'll go back to the older kid thing. One thing that's pretty cool is like, and I know that Eli's he's 18, but which is hard for me to believe at some, when I think about it. But what's been cool is to see the relationship shift already. Like with, I see these men in my house, walking around, not even, physically, but like seeing them lead and being able to have more like our relationships kind of, changing where they're not my little boys anymore, and like when I have both sides. So we've got like, our oldest just graduated from college. Our youngest just lost her third tooth, so it's like both of these are happening at the same time. But I'm excited to see, Eli's had enough. He's had enough in the next chapter of his life. Seeing Nate be involved with, like leading stuff, being up front, doing announcements last week at Grace, and just like, I'm just blown away by, I told Nate, like, I could feel like Joseph, like Jesus' dad, Joseph, a lot of times where I'm like, okay, I've had a part in raising you, but I know that God's done a lot of this work, personally, but also through other people, in his life. So like, I'm excited for what I see in him. And I think, there's certainly challenges. I think like the in-between stage this goes back to, I think, some of what we talked about before, with, coming home with a word you heard. But I remember one of the toughest years with all three was a year where one of them came back and was like, we were just button heads. And they were sort of in a tween stage. And they came back, and I remember this conversation. I'm sitting at the desk, and they came over and left me a note, and they walked away. And it was like all the stuff they're mad about. And at the end it said, and I know what sex is. And it was like, I was like, oh man, like we hadn't, like I was planning to go and do a getaway with them, and we hadn't yet. And it was just like this, like, okay, they're not like these little kids anymore. That was like where I realized like this kind of shift was happening. Like, oh wow, things are different now, but
Yeah, that's cool. They just keep rolling in for Sean. This is awesome. What advice would you give to your 20-something-year-old self about being a father and or a husband?
wow. 20-something-year-old self. I think I've learned a lot about just myself, I think, through my kids. So, going back, like, I mean, when you're a parent, it's funny, like you're just kind of thrown in. I remember walking home with Eli, our oldest, when he was newborn, and like this feeling of like when we were actually leaving the hospital, and they're letting us leave like with this kid, and I have no idea what to do. Like we had read the books and all this stuff. I think I would tell my 20-something self, it's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of difficult things that will challenge and shape you. But that, and a lot of times being a parent feels like, I don't know, whatever, you're not, you invest a lot into these kids, and sometimes you don't feel like, okay, am I really even doing the right thing? Is this worth it? And now I guess to be able to see our first leaving high school and seeing like, okay, I did a lot of things wrong. I think that would be one thing is be able to forgive yourself when you screw up, because you're going to screw up. And I think I tended to, maybe it's just how I'm wired. I tended to hold on to a lot of that, or not forgive myself where I really had botched it. And then when you do that, and then your kid misses out on the parent that you could be during that span while you're trying to like regain your footing. But yeah, just relying on God's guidance, and knowing that like, hey, we don't know it all. We're gonna mess up, but He gave us these kids. Like they're our kids, they're in our family because God blessed us with them, and so He wants us to do our best to build into them.
Cool.
Oh, good. Was there another one?
That's it over here.
Okay. Well, there's one question that's been up for a week or so. It's a little bit heavier. It's, if thou shalt not kill is one of the 10 commandments, why did God allow the firstborn son to die? I think the first observation that I have with that one is, I guess it's in regards to the 10 plagues, but the 10 commandments were written after that. So it may not apply fully in context. I would say that there was 9 chances to repent and obey God. So every time we see a killing in the Old Testament, or New Testament for that matter, we tend to think in our sinful state like, oh, they must have been innocent. But these were people who were vehemently against God or sinful in certain ways, or against God's people in ways. And if God is God, he is just for doing his actions. He's in control of that. So the people in Scripture who have been punished aren't always as innocent as we think, you know. And if we hold God to like this holy standard, then we all deserve that, honestly. And it's just out of his mercy that he's giving us a chance to be here. But what would you have to say to that?
We'd have to take it a step further though with Jesus though, because he didn't sin. He didn't deserve it. So I would frame the answer by questioning the question a little bit, because I don't think God is responsible for the death of Jesus. He doesn't. God didn't kill Jesus, and Jesus didn't kill himself, even though God's all powerful and Jesus is also all powerful. He gave himself to this earth with all the human constraints, was humbled enough to have that, and took on the wrath of our sin. And so it's actually sinful choices that also killed Jesus. So people killed Jesus. And the question did say, why did God allow that? But I just want to make it clear that it was sinful people, and it was a sin to kill Jesus, for sure, the people who put him on the cross. From the ones who actually nailed him to the cross all the way back to the ones who first accused him of doing anything wrong. All that was sin that led him to dying on the cross. And that's the beauty of the story, that he took all that upon himself for our redemption. So it's a bit confusing though. The whole idea of the atonement is hard, probably impossible for us to fully wrap our minds around.
Beautiful.
You got any additions to that, Sean?
No, other than I like challenging questions, because even though like I don't have great answers a lot of times, they've always pushed me back to. I used to work with a guy that was. We had a lot of good debates, and the best thing about it was like I never really saw a lot of progress in him as far as coming toward the Lord, but it always challenged me to go back and like reread things and wrestle with God on like, okay, yeah, Old Testament's difficult, like and sometimes it seems like, is this a totally different God, but we're thankfully in the new covenant era where like Jesus did away with a lot of that, and is taking care of that. But no, I don't want to. I think in the past I shied away more. Like I didn't want to deal with tougher questions, but not like anyone does, I think. But I think if we can embrace and at least wrestle with like, and come, like you guys said, come to the idea that like, yeah, I don't really have a great answer for that, but I want to wrestle with it.
Yeah, and I was watching it was Pastor Joel and Pastor Jonathan, their Wednesday in their Tough Questions series. And they said the opposite of belief is not doubt. The opposite of belief is unbelief. So like doubt is a thing that happens naturally with a believer when you're going from, just because you're trying to wrestle with it. And I think that's something good that helps you push you forward. This is perhaps the longest Ask Anything that we've had so far. So let me just ask a couple brief ones, unless something else came in. But when does God speak to you the most personally?
For me, it's in the woods. Short answer.
Nice.
I'd agree. Like either hiking or driving. I get I'm too ADHD brain to focus when I'm like, if I sit down to pray, like I have too much going on there. So yeah, I'm with Josiah, like a good hike or walk around the neighborhood or something like
that. If the ADHD is going to get you, this certainly will. The way that God, I believe, speaks to me the most, obviously through his word, praying, that's what God speaks to us. But for me, it is music blaring, sports on the TV, coffee in hand, and a deep book. When I have all of that at once, and the lights low. So like, I'll even like put the lights out and just totally put a candle on. I love all of that at once. That's when I feel closest to God. Weird, but it's one of the ways. All right. One question that came in from Lincoln. Shout out to Lincoln. Do you like puppets?
I love puppets. I actually love puppets.
Puppets are fun.
Josiah, do you like them?
I guess I'm kind of indifferent either way about puppets.
I will say, for me, I don't know. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, the nice thing about puppets when you're a parent is like, I can do a voice with a puppet and my daughter's okay with it. But if I do the same voice when I'm reading the book, she doesn't like that. So like, it's kind of a way to,
Gotcha.
like the way around. Yeah.
That's good.
I like Muppets. That'll be my answer to the question.
Nice.
Big fan of Muppets. All right. Anything come in, Josiah?
We did have one more. You want to take one more, or you want to save it for next week? It's up to you.
Yeah, we can take one more.
All right.
That'll call it quits.
That's good because Sean's here. Being boys, teens, and now men, and now fathers, what advice do you give to mothers about parenting boys who will grow into, hopefully, God-fearing men and husbands? Advice to mothers raising boys, basically.
Well, I'll answer real quick. Like, my wife is a great boy mom. She, which is good because with 3 of them coming up together and stuff, and I think what she's done really well is just let them like you want to protect your kids, and boys can be just like nuts. I mean, actually, my daughter's maybe just as nuts as my boys were, but I think letting them. I'm a big fan of Wild at Heart books, so like just letting them like explore, letting them be brave, letting them they're gonna get hurt, but like not holding on so tight to them that they can't be that warrior. Find out what it is inside them that God's put there to grow into this man that's gonna protect or lead or whatever.
Yeah, amen. So immediately I think of 3 resources that I've gleaned from women authors that really have a good idea of what mothership and motherhood looks like. One is called Missional Motherhood. The next one is Treasuring Christ When Your Hands Are Full. And Mama Bear Apologetics are amazing resources for moms about how to approach just motherhood from a parent's perspective. And I think a good balance in parenting is being tough and tender. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm with Sean. I'm all about exploring. We have a little creek in our backyard, and I have 3 boys, and my wife is just, Tiffany, she's probably even looking at this, like, let the kids play in the mud. Who cares? There's so many germs, and they don't care either, but they're growing, they're learning, they're exploring and stretching themselves a little bit. But each kid is different. So if one kid really just doesn't like doing that and really likes just reading by themselves, then just foster that. Look for different gifts in your kids to really allow them to be who God created them to be and not who you expect them to be because of your own personal way that you thought you should have been raised up, perhaps. But
cool. And
all right,
I'll just add that I really believe in the maternal instinct. Like, you already know what you need to do, so the best thing you can do is be a healthy, God-honoring woman. Keep your soul healthy, alive, refreshed, and then you'll know exactly what to do.
Amen. Yeah, take care of yourself. All right, that's all we have for this week. Wanted to thank Sean one more time for coming out and getting to know you a little bit better. And yeah, that's all we have. But until next time, we love you and can't wait to see you again. Take care and God bless.
Yeah.
Woo!
Now I stopped it.
That's
All
cool, man.
right.